are back. We're back. We're back. I'm so excited about today's guest, Dr. Darrin Wright. We are excited that Clark is in the house. He is such a phenomenal person, and you'll hear about his story and his work and all the things he's been doing. But before we jump into that, we want to again wish you all happy Black History Month. This has been such an amazing month. Oh my goodness, I'm just so elated pouring into our beautiful Black children, speaking to our Black queens and Black kings, and really highlighting Black excellence. That's what it's about. We want you to subscribe. So if you have not subscribed to our channels, please subscribe. Do that so you can be the first to be notified when new episodes are rolling out, whether you're watching on YouTube. On LinkedIn, you can follow us. You can follow iRace Inc. Don't forget to follow me too, Shaniqua E. Moore, so you can get some insider information on what's going on behind the scenes at iRace Girls Boys. And of course, we want you to support our ATL Rise podcast, which happens every Friday. There'll be a new episode released tomorrow. You want to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podbean, whatever platform you listen to. We want you to be the first to get the episodes when they're released. We're so excited to have you in the house virtually, Dr. Darrin. Thank you so much for your patience, and thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, thank you, Miss Moore. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor and a privilege to be on your platform and to your listening audience and just to share. So thank you for having me. And yeah, happy Thursday. And we're having a wonderful Black History Month. So just the opportunity to present during this time conversationally, it's an honor and a privilege.
It's exactly what it is. It's a conversation, and we're just happy to have you. You're from HBCU. We're going to talk about the importance of an HBCU education, and highlight some things that I think needs to be highlighted more in Black communities. So I'm happy to have you as the expert. I want to formally introduce you for those that may not know you, or for those that may. Dr. Darrin Wright, just going over a few points in your bio. For the past 15 years, he has served as the director of field education, teaching, mentoring, and developing BSW, or Bachelor of Social Work, and Master Social Work practitioners. He has his position is a director of field education, and he's the associate professor at Clark Atlanta University. He brings over 20 years of community-based social work practice experience in the areas of mental health and addictions with individuals and groups. He has a BA in forensic psychology from John Jay College of Criminal Justice in Manhattan, New York, and graduated from my school, master's in social work from Columbia University School of Social Work, also in Manhattan, New York, and a PhD in social work planning, policy, and administration from Clark Atlanta. He's a licensed social worker. He holds several certifications in addictions, trauma informed care, and true colors, personal success coach and consultant. Amazing. His areas of practice, expertise, and research interest are integrated behavioral health practice, community based partnerships and interventions, international social work, which I was not aware of that, workforce development opportunities for individuals with varying disabilities, field education, and social work licensure and regulation. Hey, y'all, he was born in Brooklyn. Where Brooklyn at? And raised in Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. So, I mean, amazing, amazing, amazing story and experience. And so we're really happy to have you, Dr. Darrin. Thank you so much again for sharing your expertise with us this afternoon.
All right, thank you. Wow, as you read that bio, I was about to look around. Who are you talking about? I can't even believe, that. It's that journey in itself it's amazing. So can't wait to share that as well. Thank
I
you
love
for the introduction.
Absolutely. Tell us more about what led you to HBCU. What was your trajectory, and how did you end up at Clark Atlanta?
You know, uh, Living in Trinidad and Tobago, and specifically in Trinidad, and going to school in the Caribbean, you're in an environment where it's black and brown spaces, but it's also a post-colonial society, and you're dealing with some of the implications and ramifications of that. I mean, I may have been younger, not have fully understood it, but being in those spaces, I knew what it was to be in environments where you were loved and cared for, and people had high expectations of you. And transitioning back to the United States as a young adult around 18, and then moving into environments where I was not valued, where I found that there were a lot of microaggression around just how I looked, and
Mhm.
those things put me in a dark place for a long time. And I always wanted to have the experience of being in an environment where I was around other Black people who were doing great things. I remember my first introduction to HBCUs was through the Jet magazine. So, believe it
Wow.
or not, the Jet magazine would always cover HBCUs and
Wow.
outstanding alums of the HBCUs. And growing up in Trinidad, even though I was born in Brooklyn and had not spent most of my formative years there, that was a way to stay connected with the
Right.
African American community and understanding the excellence around HBCUs. And I went to Columbia, which was an Ivy League school, was a great experience. But again, being in spaces where you don't see yourselves oftentimes, it can be a challenge, it can be depressing. I
Oh
think
yeah.
what helped me in that process, obviously, having a background coming from the Caribbean, coming from an air space where I saw Black and brown faces and people in positions or positionality of power and
Mhm.
excellence, that helped to absorb some of the concerns and issues that some of our younger youth may not, if they have not had those experiences or traveled outside of the country.
Right.
So, knowing about Clark Atlanta University was always something of an interest to me. And when I finished my master's degree in 2004 and moved to Georgia, I saw that as an opportunity to explore how could I become a part of a HBCU as far as teaching as an adjunct or just giving back. And the opportunity presented itself. And I must give a plug to one of my former deans who hired me in the position. I've been at Clark Atlanta University for the past 17 years,
Wow.
Dr. Rufus Sylvester Lynch. And I
Right.
think he saw that potential in me and,
Yeah.
asked me to apply for a position as a director of field education, and the rest is history as far as me being there. But that experience has been one of a rewarding one. And then I eventually went on to enroll in a PhD program at Clark Atlanta University in the Whitney M. Young Junior School of Social Work, where for the first time I was able to talk about myself,
Mm.
talk about the problems experienced by Black people in a
Mhm.
way that I never felt I could while at Columbia. So at Columbia, I felt that I could talk about it, but there was always this need, or professors were always this need to universalize my experience.
Mm. Yeah.
And I wanted to particularize my experience, you see?
Yes.
And Clark Atlanta University allowed me to do that. It gave me the ability to position myself in the discourse. So clearly, from the School of Social Work, we operate from an Afrocentric perspective, and that is a part of the perspective, which is positioning oneself in the discourse and being the subject, being the object, I'm sorry, of the discussion, and not being just someone talking about you, but you actually being centered in the discourse and having creating new knowledge about oneself. So that's how
Mm.
I ended up at Clark Atlanta University, the HBCU experience, and I love it. I wouldn't give this up for anything else.
So we can't recruit you over here at iRace then?
Hey, we never
I
know.
love I love it. No, I mean, I'm listening and it's just so astounding to hear your story. And there's so many things I want to touch on, but that we don't have the time for. But even
Yeah.
that experience in the West Indies, growing up, being able to see Black people in power, having that direct experience, knowing what that's like, but then having almost a culture shock when you came to America and you're wondering what's going on. This is not what it looks like at home. And so that for you, just, you described it as being depressing. It's microaggressions for those that don't know what microaggressions are. They're subliminal forms of racism. Sometimes they're not overt. A lot of times they're covert, but you Blacks experience them on a daily basis. We did a study at iRaise about 2 years ago on the psychological effects of racism on adolescents, and Black boys reported experiencing microaggressions on average 7 times a day. And it was self-reporting that to the causality between racism and depression. So there was a relationship that Black boys were self-reporting. And so what you're saying, um, just that feeling of being depressed, being in that and going through it directly as a Black man, transitioning from the West Indies to America, but then going into an Ivy League education, and we're from the same school, being in that, right? And it's interesting because you graduated 2004, is that correct? So
That's
I
correct.
graduated 6 years after you. I started in 2009. I graduated in 2010. So I was a class, a few classes after you, but also remember a very similar experience and not being able to talk about the Black experience in a way that felt safe, in the way that did not feel like I was being judged or I had to stand up for and advocate for Blacks in the classroom and correct peers and professors and have to educate them on what Black is and is not. That is a
Absolutely.
burden in itself to carry. And so I
Yes.
am so feeling you when you talk about that experience and then going into Clark Atlanta and how that was so different for you. I love that. I love it so much. Thank you for sharing that. Um, you talked about transition into Clark Atlanta, and I want you to sort of dig deeper into the concept, but you said when you were talking about the Black experience, you did it in a way that was not universal, but that was very particular. What did that look like in Clark Atlanta for you? Or what does it look like now? I'm sure you're still doing it.
Yeah, so it really looks at, using organizing frameworks to center you in the discourse of the phenomena and not using only white terminology and white conceptualizations of Black people in order to understand Black problems, Black and brown problems, but really having the confidence to look at other methods, other paradigms, other concepts to understand the issues that impact people of African descent and other people of color and other people who are marginalized and stigmatized within our societies. So Clark, in my opinion, particularly the university in general, it enshrines this belief that there is a social justice piece to HBCUs. HBCUs have always held a social justice perspective. When you look at some of the civil rights leaders, from Kwame Ture, better known as Stokely Carmichael, to Reverend Martin Luther King and others, they all went to HBCUs. And because of that, they brought a different perspective. They understood that social justice piece and the importance of advocacy and making change. And that, I think, is interwoven. It's the foundation of all HBCUs, regardless of where you find them, whether private or state-run HBCUs. So, that experience in itself is a rewarding one. And the other thing too, I would say HBCUs, and particularly at Clark Atlanta University, it provides a safe space, a psychologically safe space where individuals can grow. Because education, when we look at the root word in Latin, educare, is to lead out, it is to develop. So it's more than just providing with skills that you go into the workforce, but it's really from a holistic perspective and really helping to develop that individual. Because we have students coming from differing experiences, and those experiences need to be acknowledged. And as social workers, Ms. Moore, we know we have to meet our client where they are and help assist them in the process of getting them to where they want to be. And I think for the most part, scholars, professors within HBCUs understand that. They understand that mandate. They understand that mission. And there is that extra effort to meet students where they are and then to get them to where we would like to see them based on their diverse disciplines.
I love that. That so much. If you can talk a little bit about the difference for a uh, black college student that goes to HBCU versus an Ivy League school, what in your experience, what would you say the major differences are?
Yeah, so again, that support, I think that's that, in my opinion, that is fundamentally one of the things that students get. They get that support from the faculty, from the staff, from every personnel that you are valued, you matter. You know,
Mhm.
you being here is important to us. You are part of us. Doesn't mean that everything works well in HBC. We know that that is not the case, right? Funding and different things, and we'll probably talk more about that if we have the time to do that.
Mhm.
However, there is that belief that you matter, your presence here is valued, and
Mhm.
we see the potential in you, and we want you to accomplish and become all that you can become. Now, I'm not saying at PWIs that that does not happen, but there's a recent study
Mhm.
that was done by it's called, and the listening audience can look it up. It's done by the Lumina Foundation Gallup study of 2023. And
Mhm.
it's the title says Black students are less likely to attain college degrees because of discrimination and external responsibilities. So
Mm.
when we look at the data, we can see while we have more students possibly accessing PWIs,
Mhm.
they are less likely oftentimes to graduate. And some of the things that the studies highlighted were the students' perceptions of being feeling discriminated against, as
Right.
well as other external responsibilities, such as being caregivers for
Right.
loved ones and taking on other burdens. In my opinion, at HBCUs, we understand that because we have all gone through that experience. I
Mhm.
am not far removed from that. You know, I
Mhm.
worked full time and went to school. As a matter of fact, I had never went to school on a full-time basis. I worked while going to school. I just couldn't afford not to work. So we
Mhm.
understand these challenges, and those are some of the supports that we bring to the table to
Yeah.
help see students across the finish line. And one final example I'd like to give you, again, at the Whitney M. Young Junior School of Social Work, our PhD program is a part-time program in that all the classes are in the evening from 6 to 9. It's a
Oh my
four-year
God, so
program.
fun.
And yeah, you need to. It's designed for working families because we understand that African Americans and other people of color more than likely may not be able to just quit their jobs and take on such a rigorous study on a full-time basis. However, there are
Right.
challenges. Funding, right? Funding is always an issue for so many of our students. But the model works because it helps us to still maintain employment. But it's something that needs to be changed. We need more funding. But that's how I was able to obtain my PhD. I could not attend a traditional program and
Mhm.
just up and leave my family, all my responsibilities, being a caregiver, and just
Mhm.
say I'm going to go there for 2 years and then I'm done and take on become Dr. Wright. That would not have happened.
Mm-mm. You know, I love everything that you're saying, and I'm just so grateful for the information. I'm thinking about a student that I had. She was actually a Caribbean student. She was an intern, and she was working and interning and trying to manage and balance. And school of social work is a challenge. It's a challenge because you have to do your field work. You're expected to be in all your classes, and there's tons of things going on. And then if you're working on top of that, you have to try to balance your life, your family, work. And so this particular intern was in a really challenging, tough place and a hard place. And she came to me and said, I'm falling behind. She went to an Ivy League school too, in New York City, and she told me she was falling behind. And I really tried to work with the student, and it didn't, because I don't want to see a young Black girl quit. I don't want to see it. Whatever I can do to push her forward, push them forward so they make the finish line. That is my goal, my desire. But I think whatever ended up happening, she could not. She quit. She ended up dropping out. And she just you when you were talking, it reminded me of her. But I tried to reach out, and I think by the time I reached out, she's like, Miss Moore, I already withdrew. And I was like, no. And that really broke my heart because it was like, I don't want to see our Black girls, our young Black women quit. They need this kind of support. And so when you talk about a HBCU, understanding the issues, the real issues that Black college students are facing, it's so important that the environment and the model, it really uplifts them. And so I think a lot of times, college students are under so much pressure, and when you're coming from a family that may not have as much resources, you're sort of feeling like you're on your own dealing with this. And so I love having that. It reminds me of a village, having that village of support for Black students.
I agree with you. And the buzzwords now in social work, education, and across social work is diversity, equity, inclusion, access.
Mhm.
My dissertation revolved around access for individuals with mental health conditions, and there are different dimensions of access.
Right.
So as we think about access, even for uh, from utilizing the perspective that I talked about from before, whether we're looking at a universalistic or a targeted approach.
Right.
Universalistic will say, okay, access, everyone has access, we got that. But unless we drill down into that, we recognize that oftentimes many Black students may not, their access, yes, I
Mm,
got into college, but do you have access to a computer? Because
that's
this
right.
work might require you to do it beyond your iPhone, right?
Hmm.
Do you have access to stable service, internet?
Right.
Right? Do you have access to the appropriate food and different things that you need? So there needs to be a deeper dive, right?
Mm,
And that's what HBCUs or PWIs, particular PWIs, I think, in terms of understanding how do you support students. So access is one thing, but we must look at the dimensions of access. How
right.
welcoming is your staff and your
Mm,
faculty to students? All of that plays a part in access.
yes.
So there are different dimensions that we must think about when we think about access, as we're looking at helping to meet the needs and bridge the gap for Black students or African American students and other students of color.
Mm. I love what you're saying about dimensions of access, and then I feel like it really is multifaceted, and a lot of times we only look at it one dimensional. But there are so many levels to it, like you mentioned, and that's where a lot of students essentially get stuck when they've gotten in the door, but they don't have enough support to make it to the finish line. But being able to assess that at the door, even beforehand, and really targeting supports to students to make sure that they have exactly what they need to stay the course. I remember doing a study, and I don't remember where, don't quote me on it because I don't remember where, what source I was reading. But we were embarking, the organization a few years ago was embarking on a program to help students, college students in their first year, really acclimate to the environment on campus, and to be able to learn essential college student skills. And what we found in our studies was that a lot of college students by their second year, namely Black kids, were dropping out. And the numbers were getting smaller. They were declining more and more every semester. So it would be a large number starting out first semester. Second semester, about half the Black students are gone. The next year, another third are leaving. And by the time you make it to graduation, you have such a small percentage of Black students that have finished. And so, this is why dimensions of access is important to address, not just in HBCUs, but definitely in all other schools as well. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm wondering if you can speak to I don't know if you can talk a little bit about the social emotional aspect of a HBCU education. And the reason why I say that is because I have a lot of colleagues out in the field that they're all HBCU graduates, and they have this inflated sense of self and identity. And I'm like, ah, man, I wish I went to HBCU. And it's just this aura about them that they carry, just being a graduate. What does that look like? What does that feel like?
It's an awesome feeling. You know, you're dealing with a lot of history and tradition from the D9 organizations. I happen to be a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And on the yard at Clark Atlanta University, Phi Alpha happens, you know, they said, how goes Phi Alpha, so goes Clark Atlanta University. You know, it's a bold statement, isn't it? But, you know, these are the traditions that exist, you know. So you have Miss Clark Atlanta, Mr. and Mrs. Clark Atlanta University. You have all these different things that are going on that, again, as we said, education, educare, which is to lead out. This education is one that is holistic, that it helps that individual to see themselves in ways that they may not have seen themselves before, right? We have to also put in the dimensions of class, right? Because not all of our students are coming from their parents had, you know, the money to send them there. You know, we have many of our students, whether it's at HBCUs or PWIs, on financial aid. Financial aid is supporting them through this process. So this is an opportunity for students really to see themselves in a different way and be supported in that process, you know, to develop the leadership skills that they will need to be the movers and shakers that will change or lead, address, find new solutions to old problems, right? So that's one of the things that I think HBCUs equip their students with. You know, they equip them with that confidence needed to go forward and do that. You know, at Clark Atlanta University, our motto is find a way or make one, right? So for me, that motto just speaks so much. It is saying it is the reality of the Black experience in America, that we will have to find a way, or if not, we will make one. There's not a table, we will create a table and we'll put ourselves at that table. You know, so that's the attitude that you see. That's the bravado that you see with the HBCU alums as they bring it to the workforce. You know, but you know, the other thing too that is important that you talked about, as I kind of think about what is needed, even as we look at the work that you're doing in the high schools, you know, it is the support. It is understanding those behavioral supports that are needed, because you know more and more students are showing up that have experienced traumatic experiences, right? And those students go on to graduate and come into colleges and universities. They don't leave those experiences. Those experiences also come with them as they transcend into colleges and universities. So clearly there needs to be more bridge programs where colleges and universities are reaching out into high schools, you know, to provide the type of insight and help individuals understand what are some of the benefits from going to college. And, you know, the model is a bit outdated as well, Ms. Moore. You know, when we look at this model, you know, we have to reimagine, as you mentioned. And for me, the metaphor of reimagination is a Sankofa bird. If you look at the Sankofa bird, which is an Akan symbol, it shows a bird with its feet pointing forward, and the head of the bird is facing backward, picking a pebble from its back. And what it's saying is that as we move forward, we are pulling from the past that which makes sense as we move into the future. And as I think about that, I am thinking about ways of how we continue to bridge the gap with colleges, with fraternities. For instance, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated has a program that's called Go to High School, Go to College. And we have members who are working within the high schools through mentorship, through presenting to help individuals, to inspire them to see the connection with moving on from high school and the importance of college. But college has to be redefined. There's just not one way to look at college. We have to also consider more and more, and I think people are doing that, in terms of certification. Not everybody will need a degree.
That's right.
But there are skill sets that people need. So we have to look at what certificates or what certifications are needed or valued, and create opportunities for individuals to have, yes, a 4-year degree, and opportunities for certificates. So that might be a certificate in cybersecurity. and then you can have the requisite skill sets and still go through some of the trainings that we talked about in terms of character building to
Right.
help you with those soft skills so that you can get a job and keep the job, because those are two different sets of skill sets.
Oh
And
yeah.
believe me, I know that as director of field education and
Right.
placing students, So it's one thing to
Imagine.
get the internship, but it's another thing to keep the internship.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. God bless our interns. Oh Lord. Yeah, we have quite a number of them at iRaise. They're doing great work, and we support them as much as we can along the way. I understand that plight. You know, I love everything you're saying, and it just reminds me. I had the privilege of talking to some middle school beautiful kids at Dr. King Middle School just a few moments ago, and I was talking to them about the importance of HBCU education, although I've never had one. And a lot of these kids, they were really encouraged and wanted to pursue a HBCU education but didn't know how. And one particular girl, actually, as I was leaving, she had one of the organization's brochure, and she pointed to the brochure and said, I want to get into this program. It's the College and Access program. And I said, well, that program starts at ninth grade. You're in seventh grade, so you got to wait until ninth grade. And she's like, but I want to prepare. How do I prepare to get into the program? And as I'm talking to her, I'm like, why can't she take it now? So now I'm going to go back to my staff after this because we may have to just start changing the age that we bring these kids into the college access program, because now looking at it, middle school students want to be a part of it. They want access. Some of them want access at sixth and seventh grade, and they're thinking about college now. And we have to be able to create pathways and to create access. So not just high school, but also middle school, recruiting our middle school students into the best education that they can get in high school and then into HBCUs. And so one of my goals is, how do we bridge the gap? How do we work with HBCUs in an area like Clark Atlanta, to bring our kids up that are in middle and high school, and to support them along the way so that they graduate and they have a pathway to get to these HBCUs? That really is a goal of mine, especially out here in Metro Atlanta.
I love it. I think that's a great goal, and it's an opportunity for you to meet with Clark Atlanta University and the other schools in the AU Center, right? So you have Spelman, you have Morehouse, and you have Morris Brown College. So this is all part of the AU Center. I think it's a great opportunity for you to present what you're doing, your ideas, and then how can you partner with these institutions? Because again, HBCUs, we have to and must, and in keeping with our traditions, must live beyond the walls of academia. We have a responsibility to partner
Mhm.
with organizations such as yourself, and then reaching back into our middle schools, as you talked about, in our high schools, and finding out how do we bridge the gap, reimagining things, being
Yes.
open to, again, using that Sankofa metaphor as we move forward. We're moving forward with new ideas. We pull from the past that which makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then we don't need to move forward with that. We need to rethink that, because people, education has to be also individualized. Okay,
Hmm.
we can't just use a standard way of thinking about education. We have to individualize it more. It has to be student focused or student centered, right? And it has to face those realities of individualizing it and not having this cookie cutter approach to what education will look like. It cannot
Absolutely.
be this somewhat like a banking system, as what Bell Hooks talked about in her book, teaching to transgress. She's right. We have to think outside of the box as it relates to education and the ways how we can impact individuals at the middle school and even at the elementary level, as we talk about, right? Because we understand that, again, this is a lifelong learning. We want to look at education as a lifelong learning process. What are the skill sets you'll need from the cradle to the grave in order
Mhm.
to fulfill your manifest destiny
Yes.
within this life?
Mm. I love that. That's so well said. And so I'm wondering what are some ways that HBCUs, and we touched on this already, could help bridge that gap. We talk a lot about, school to prison pipeline. How do we create school to HBCU pipelines? What would that look like? And this a
Yeah,
reimagined education.
I think being intentional, I see this as an opportunity for, again, establishing, affiliation agreements or memorandum of understanding with organizations to have HBCUs, faculty, and others to sit with all of the stakeholders, including students,
Hmm.
right, to have their voice at the table, right,
Yes,
and to begin to have a dialogue about the best ways that make sense for everyone, right? For me, that's from an African centered perspective. That is the use of the term imbongi, which is to bring everyone into a common area and give
hmm,
common voice. We have to democratize this process, right?
love that.
And get the views of everyone so that we come up with solutions that
Hmm.
make sense. Can't be solutions that are top down.
That's right.
This has to be a shared governance in the best way so that we can find solutions to old problems.
Mm, I love it. This is so amazing. We have to continue this discussion. I know we are out of time, but you are so full of wisdom. And, I love how you intertwine the African proverbs and traditions into the things that you said. I think that is exactly what our kids are missing, what they need, and what's going to help propel them forward. Connect to who they truly are, not who social media or the media tells them who they are or will not be. But when they are able to connect to their African diaspora, I think that it really helps to allow them to see that they can really be whoever they want to be. They're not a victim of their environment or their circumstances. And this is why HBCU education is important so important and so vital. So I want to thank you for the work that you're doing out in Clark, Atlanta, with all the social work students. I know we'll be partnering next school year. We're really excited about bringing in some interns and taking them under our wings and helping them get to their next level. But we appreciate you, Dr. Wright, for all that you're doing, and continue the course. Continue the course.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. I appreciate you, and I thank you again for the honor and privilege to be on your platform and continue doing the good work that you're doing as a leader in the community, a leader in social work, social practice, and education, because oftentimes we forget that field. And as a field instructor, field is the signature pedagogy of social work education. So we
That's
thank you
right.
for being a leader in that way as well. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Dr. Darrin. And before we go, can you tell us two people that we may not know or may know that graduated from HBCU that might be famous today?
Sure. Well, I can mention one. We saw that recent the Super Bowl. We heard the singing of the what is dubbed the Black National Anthem. It's really a hymn, but James Baldwin Johnson is an alum
Wow.
of Atlanta University,
Mm,
and also another person who taught at Clark Atlanta University. I'd like to highlight also would be W.E. Du Bois, who is considered the father of sociology and forerunner in terms of understanding the social conditions through his study in regards to the Philadelphia Negro. So those are just two. There are many others that I can cite, but those are just two that I would like to leave our listening audience with.
I love it. I love it. Great things, great people, movements are coming out of HBCUs. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Darrin.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Have a
all.
blessed one. Thanks to the listening audience as well.
Yes, thank you to our audience. I thank you to all those watching and supporting our content. We appreciate all of you so much. We want to lift this message up. So please don't forget to share this message out. Comment below if you're watching the recording later on. We want to hear your thoughts. So comment below and share it out to your networks. We want to lift up this conversation, the importance of HBCU education. Stay tuned. We'll be back next week. Don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow we'll be releasing our podcast episode, The King in You, dedicated to all our Black men out there. Make sure you download or you subscribe to our podcast so that you can be the first to get notified. Happy Black History Month, everybody. We love you so much, and we'll see you next week.